Now, a lot of twists and turns in the last couple of days, and there was only one person I could think of to talk to about it. I've missed her. It's been, what, about 10 days? It is, of course, well, she's my former co-host on Crosstalk, and also she's connected to the Reform UK party and a former UKIP pioneer and star. She is, of course, the great Alex Phillips. Alex, welcome.
Hi, Kaz. How are you? I've missed you.
Yeah, God, you already. There you are. Alex is in Lanzarote because she's a jet setter. But I thought about you as soon as I saw this story, Alex, and you'll be able to inform me as well as the viewers and the listeners. The UK government will not take back asylum seekers who have crossed into Ireland, we say, until the EU-wide asylum rules have changed. In other words, the Irish seem to decide that because some migrants were coming to Britain and then heading to Northern Ireland and then going into Ireland, that they could then send them back to England. Or to Westminster, if you like. And guess what? Rishi Sunak has finally grown a pair and said it's not going to happen.
Yeah, good. What is good for the goose is good for the gander. And the point is, we should be returning people crossing the channel illegally, breaking into our country back to France. That is a safe place. They don't have no need to be getting on dinghies and coming over here and claiming refuge if they're coming from France. But the EU have always said, and France has always said, well, if you're going to do that, you've got to be part of our greater scheme where we're all going to share the migrants out with particular quotients depending on the size of your GDP per capita. And that's just ludicrous. You know, that is not how the system works. And so it's all very well Ireland saying, well, 80% of our migrants coming into the country are crossing over from Northern Ireland, go back to the UK. You're just going back to the EU, basically, from whence you came. And that's how it should be. And you know what? I would go even further. I would almost suggest that what we should do is build a big migrant centre right on the border, because, of course, it's an open border there, and say to the migrants who've come over illegally, look, stay here. You get a bit of stale bread and a bunk bed. But actually, if you just walk 10 metres in that direction, you could go to the EU. How do you like that?
Yeah, I mean, we're not actually technically. Ireland seems to, you know, the politicians in Dublin, they have no great love for Britain. Historically, they never have. But they seem to be acting as if they're dealing with Britain here, or the Britain is dealing with Ireland, and Ireland, we're going to send them back to you. And I say, well, no, you're not. This is not Britain and Ireland, is it? This is Britain and the EU. Yeah. That's the situation.
Right, and it's the EU who can't manage their own frontiers. It's the EU who insist on having open borders, who scrapped all common sense, you know, passport checks, visa checks between countries. It's the EU under Angela Merkel who said, come one, come all, refugees welcome. It's the EU who are refusing to allow Italy to turn boats around off the coast of Lampedusa. This is an EU problem. What we're having in the UK is a spillover from abject failings of the EU to control its own frontiers. And so it is a bit rich of Dublin to turn around and suddenly want some sort of special relationship with the UK. That wasn't particularly their tone during Brexit.
Well, if they're going to return migrants to Britain, then why can't we return migrants to France?
Yeah, exactly. We should technically have no migrants, should we? We should have nobody coming here illegally, because I think it's pretty near impossible to get a dinghy from the north of Africa and find yourself in Dover. That is almost impossible. That can't happen. So every single person who's coming here and claiming asylum by small boat isn't really an asylum seeker, because they're coming from a safe country. Every single last one.
Indeed. Now, do you trust Rishi to deal with this? Because, as I said earlier, he's finally grown a pair and he's talking quite tough. But I sent you some statistics earlier today that are quite breathtaking. In the 25 years up to Tony Blair's election in the 90s, total net migration into Britain was 68,000. In the following 25 years up to 2022, it was a staggering 5.9 million, an increase of 100 times, and it's going up and up and up. What are we going to do about this? It's ridiculous.
Do you know, it's actually even more breathtaking when you understand that last year we had total gross migration of over 1 million people. Even the net migration last year, 750,000, was more than the entire decade. In fact, it was more than the 1960s up until the turn of the century, all put together in 1 year alone. And there's always been this argument that actually we need this for our economy. We need this to increase GDP. What we now know is that OBR's reports themselves have turned around and said that the incoming community, the incoming demographic, is no more economically active than the domestic demographic. So therefore, you're not having just people contributing to the workforce. You're having lots of other people who are dependents and extra mouths to feed around the table. We need to build minimum, conservative estimate now, minimum 250,000 houses every single year just to keep up with the rate of inward migration. It is insane. And, you know, you can talk about this from the economic point of view, the strain on public services, the fact you can't plan infrastructure. But I think the thing that we're not talking about enough is, in my mind, this is also willful cultural vandalism. It's cultural vandalism. It's changing the face of Britain, and that is irrevocable. You cannot suddenly flood a country with a whole new population, defend your own culture, your own morals, your own values, or somehow try and get that back down the line. We're not talking about that element enough, the huge social change. And this isn't happening to the David Camerons living in the leafy Cotswolds. Those aren't the high streets changing beyond recognition. It's happening to the working classes who are also losing their jobs, who are seeing their wages driven down, who don't recognise the communities they were born in anymore.
It's like being on Crosstalk all over again. I knew you'd be exactly the right guest for this story. But you and I, Alex, were always saying, why don't they just turn the boats, the migrants' boats, round in mid-channel? They come up with all sorts of reasons why we shouldn't do this. Usually it's that people like you and I are not serious. That's what they say when people come up with logical arguments that they don't like. You're not serious. Well, we are serious. Turn the boats round. Why won't they do that?
I think they say it's all about protecting life, isn't it? And unless you've got a returns agreement with the other country and there's some sort of reciprocity and that country says, yes, you can re-enter our territorial waters with these people and bring these people to the country legally, then actually we're breaking some sort of protocol or international law. But actually, that's not strictly true. We have every right to set up barricades and push boats back like they did in Australia. But then people say, oh, well, what if people drown at sea as a result? They chose to get on boats. They chose to get on these flimsy vessels. They chose to pay people traffickers connected to international terrorist organizations, Wagner mercenaries, hostile states, and just general ne'er-do-wells. They chose to do that and break the law and put their lives at risk. Why are we now having to say, OK, well, because you're willing to risk your own life to get into this country, therefore we have to accept you? That makes no sense.
And now Ireland can find out how we feel. Listen, Alex, it was just like being back on Crosstalk. It's really good to hear you. I knew that you'd come up with all the facts that I don't know. So thank you once again and enjoy the rest of your holiday. Great to talk to you. The inimitable Alex Phillips there. Now